Go to bed. Okay. We're still in halacha down. We're doing part 2 of the spray jars and other jars.
We have one this week, by the way?
We did have this week, yes.
Okay.
You can buy the tape in Rosenborg's.
Together with my vegetarian,
okay. Okay. What we did last week was an introduction to, which is really the part that connects halacha daled. Halacha daled was about what needs libud, and we spoke about four criteria, and Yossi pointed out that there are really 5 criteria for deciding whether clean needs libud or hagala. Okay, to just say briefly, the criteria were: it has to be a dry product, it has to be on the fire or close to the fire. That's the most crucial one for our purposes. It has fire for that means, which we're going to see later, means literally a fire or an electric coil, and near we define as being close enough that if not for a fan blowing it in, it would still heat up.
What they say is that the chimul, the constant chimul going on. Let's say microwave. Is that a...
Microwave, I don't know the answer. What it is, it's probably not considered al-eish. It's not al-eish. But it doesn't have to be a constant. Doesn't have to be constant. But there's a. We've mentioned the previous garden that even if there's no more fire left in the chamber, it's still considered al-eish. If you take it off and turn the fire off and then you put food into it, that's still considered al-eish. So it doesn't have to be a continuous, like more pumping in of heat into it.
What al-eish?
But it was considered that's considered al-eish. As opposed to what he said, that it has to be the fire keep pushing in more heat into it, even though it stopped. The heat that came is not going to add more heat to it. That's also considered al-eish. Okay. The third criteria was a Rabbi Belsky thing that it has to be over 200 degrees, and fourth was that the only things that have direct contact with the food, rather as opposed to like the whole chamber that just has blias, what most consider to just be zay coming out of the food. That's a liquid and not a solid, and therefore there's no libud. And Yossi, it said the 5th one, which was from the week beforehand, which was that if you do heter bala, then you don't need libud either. Okay, those are the 5 rules of what needs libud.
What is this Tony Grease stuff?
You'll watch the videotape and you'll find out. We'll talk about it afterwards. Okay, so that was an introduction to. That's the part that's with halacha daled, but the introduction to understanding in a dryer, spray dryer is the most prominent of them, but in a dryer, does it need libud or does it need hagala? Libud usually means it's hopeless, you can't kasher it, you have to throw the thing out or change the belt or whatever it is that touches the food, and hagala is reasonable, libud kal is reasonable. So that's an introduction to understanding about dryers. And in fact, I was going to give you some this week, instead of giving you something else, which is, this is a thing completely about dryers, okay, and that what we talked about last week is in the introduction part. It's starting on like the 2nd page for a couple of pages. Those pratim. Okay, then that's really from the introduction side, because the rest of it is about the dryers themselves. You have to have these rules in your head before you look at a dryer and say, well, does it need libud, does it need alcohol? Okay, so that's why that's an introduction. So even though I usually do not give things out until the end because it distracts you, I'm going to use because we're going to use the pictures in here just to follow along. Okay. The beginnings of this actually is from a clip. I gave you 2. It's a mistake. It's actually from a clip that I did with Shalom many years ago, but it then followed with other things that came afterwards. Okay, so let's do the spray dryers first. You know they're not first in this handout over here. Okay. Okay. Let's start with. I have to start with the job of history. 25 years ago, I don't know, whenever people first started realizing or considering how they should kasher spray dryers, when the trials were first starting, 20 years ago, I don't know how long it was, the big trial was, does it need libud or does it need hagala? That was a main trial, and it was like left hanging, does it need libud or does it need hagala? What I said last week, that these 4 rules or 5 rules of how to tell libud or hagala is from many years of people haggling and going back and forth till they came to some kind of an understanding. But at that time it was very unclear, and there was very strong belief that it needed libud, and therefore they didn't know what to do. If it needs libud, then they couldn't catch it. What did you say?
Just stand there and ignore the whole thing.
So what they did was, there's a din that says that it used to be that everyone didn't have their own oven in their house. There was one baker in town, and if the baker was a guy, then you were up the creek, because they would use treif stuff. They would use treif in their ovens. So the oven you could kasher, But what about the thing that you take the food out of the oven with? It's called the marda. So it's like in a pizza shop. You see they use this long stick that they pull it out with. How do you kasher that? The problem with kashering is that it's made out of wood. You can't do libun to something made out of wood. Okay, so the din is if the marda is ain't binyamin, you're allowed to use it. Why? Because since people have no choice but to eat bread, to Lashon is our lechem yesh adam, since they have no choice but to eat bread, Memela, they have to, Chazal, so to speak, took back the Xer in the Binyamin Ata Binyamin because or else people would be stuck. They wouldn't have anything to eat. It's in your day. I don't remember what favorite it is. I can find it for you. Okay, so it's a din of a marza that's something so crucial. Therefore, as if they took off that Xer of Ein Binyamin Ata Binyamin.
Now, who is doing it? Or who was doing it? That the guy was doing it for the eat, or he was doing it by himself?
I don't know. I'm not sure. But it was being done, yes, but it was being done specifically for the Yidden. It was that the Yidden came on Tuesday to buy their food because they hadn't been used since Sunday or whatever it is, whatever the chesed was. So Ravelsky said, to say that we can't kasher any spray dryers would be like a marka. He says it would be such a crimp in the ability of people to have kosher food because so many foods would be cut out that therefore we could say the same thing, which is if it's ein ben yomer, then you could use it. Okay, make it ein ben yomer. Do whatever kind of kashering you could do to it, because first of all, they didn't know if it needed libun, and even needed hagala. They couldn't make hagala. They couldn't physically pull it off to get a hagala going. So he said, make it ein ben yomer, and we'll look at the spray dryer industry as a whole as a marda, and if it's ein ben yomer, you could use it. That was his chiddush that you could do it. So what happened? That was way back when. And from there, they made a very serious rule that people don't use spray dryers unless they're Eid ben Yoma. They're not Semach Begima. They're not Semach. It has to be really Eid ben Yoma. And then they try what they can, which I know this is not Jewish, but they sprinkle the holy water on it. That's what they do. It comes out cold out of the bottom, and they consider that they kasher. Okay, that was what always went on. Then came along 10 years ago, maybe around there, Rabbi Blugland figured out, he decided he's going to put his mind to it, and he put loads of time in this, and figured out how you could kasher it with hagala, how you could really get hagala, boiling water coming out of the thing, which is what we're going to talk about in a second. And at the same time, the halacha part of it was becoming more clear of which ones need libun and which ones need hagala. So then two questions came back to Rabbi. One was, if you look at the whole spray dryer industry, you could say this is a marza. But if we could clarify that some need hagala, some need libun, and most of them need hagala, so that is it a marza to use those leftover dryers? One of the questions was somebody walked into a factory that had two spray dryers right across from each other. One, the fire was right on top of the dryer, and one, the fire was very far away. One needed hagala, one needed libun. So is that a marza that we have to use this dryer and not use that dryer? That's a marza? Like we're so desperate to be able to use it? Because if you look at the whole industry, you could say that. But if you're looking at it, once you clarify din-wise that some need libun and most need hagala, so some we won't be able to use. That was one question. And from a different angle, a question was, now the Rabbi Blugland figured out how to do hagala, and he used to go around from company to company. They would send him to do reviews to companies, and he would tell them, don't do what you're doing now, I'm going to teach you how to kasher it for real. And
he was able to get out 212 water from the bottom?
Yes. Okay, so he did it, I don't know how many dozens of times. Okay, your company does it also.
Not 212.
I don't remember the exact number. He was there.
It was 200. That was the cheap question. Well, okay, but most of it is made to 12. I don't think
okay. He used to do it all over the place. So the shiloh was now that he's able to do it, and now let's say that half the companies that have spray dryers are cashing the right way. So why should we be settle for other people just being Ein ben Yomer and do what they can if he could really do it? So should they insist that they therefore force everybody to do the right way? So I basically both of them no. He said that the rules still of it being Ein ben Yomer and doing what you can is still fine. As we try to slowly progress to getting everybody on, that's a hashara of maybe we're too overconfident that we believe that we have it all settled and this and that, and it has to be he's feeling like they should do it more slowly, which is in fact why there are plenty of places that are still kashering with this funny method. They let it be Ein ben Yomer, they do their water and whatever. Okay, so what I'm going to describe to you is what Rabbi Blugland does. I'm not nearly as technical as he is, so I can't give you every part of his thing. But this is the basics of what he does. To be able to catch the spray, just to get Hagal to it. Okay, this is assuming that you can do Hagal to it, or assuming you're willing to do Hagal to it and let it just be in the beginning. The first thing is, and this is most people do, they preheat the spray jar so that it'll be easier to get the water hot later on. Okay. You then, of course, have to turn the fire off when you're spray drying, but they preheat the fire. They preheat the spray jar. You'll remember in Halacha Gimel we talked about that a kli rishon that was used al ha'esh has to be kashered al ha'esh rather than shaloi agav ha'esh. Well, there's a shayla about that. And l'chayra over here, what goes on is that it's belayed as a kli rishon al ha'esh. It's so much al ha'esh it might even need legal, but it's truly al ha'esh. And we brought up the question there, which never occurred to me before that, which was, why the Kashering was being done shaloi agav ha'esh. You turn the fire off before you put the water in. You can't put the water in when the fire is on. So l'chayra it's a kli rishon. Your Kashering is a kli rishon shaloi agav ha'esh, which was a shayla. A machlokes whether you're allowed to do that. The pashas that you have to be machmer on that shayla, and a kli rishon agav ha'esh has to be kashered also agav ha'esh. Okay, so I don't have an answer to that. There's a possible answer we'll see in the next halacha. A possible answer, which is itself very questionable. To say that what we do is considered al ha'esh. That's stuff very questionable. But it's just worth bringing up that point. Anyhow, the first thing is that you preheat the thing, and then you're going to pour water on it. Will my thing sound a little familiar?
Yeah, I don't know if familiar at all.
Okay, fine. Okay. Now, then the next thing is that what people assume that they're going to do when they capture the spray jar is they pour the water through the spray nozzles. That's the easy way to get water into the spray jar. Okay. Of course, with the spray nozzles, sometimes don't even hit the walls. Okay. Sometimes they're set up to not even hit the walls. But even if they do, they give it a tiny amount of water, and you really have to put spray balls into it. Special cleaning spray balls, not the spray nozzles that are not meant to do this also. However, you have to remember that if you're catching the spray balls, you have to catch the spray nozzles themselves also. Okay. I think I told this to you. I once went to a place where they were catching the spray jar. Then they were using the spray nozzle, but when I walked up to the top of the dryer, I found that there was a whole bunch of spray nozzles. There wasn't just one; there were a whole bunch of them. So they were using one during the cleaning. That has nothing to do with whether they use that one during the kashrus.
I mean, the spray nozzle is a very small thing, right?
Yeah, I didn't say that it makes the food trace b'diavad. I'm saying it's just a matter of sticking another one on and letting the water run through it. So what are you letting yourself? You shouldn't forget, especially if you use spray balls, you might not even look at the spray nozzle. You have to remember that those pieces, and there are other little pieces, there's shovels and brushes and things like that get used there also. But whatever's there has to be kasher. It's not. You can't only think about the dryer and forget about all the little things that you would always kasher that any regular person would kasher. Okay. Also, another thing is that the people assume they're going to kasher the whole thing at once, and really the right way to do it is to do the drying chamber by itself, and then the duct work separately and the cyclone separately. Okay, that makes it you could actually pull this whole thing off if you do them separately. And part of doing them separately is, if you look at the picture, look at a good picture. In the duct. There's a picture here on 19. This is not a good picture. Let's look at this picture. In the picture 19, page 19. If you're casting this chamber, the chamber, then you have to what they call blank off the ductwork that you're not using, which would mean is you see the right dotted line going down there. You have to put a blank they call into that spot over there, straight down to cut off the duct. You put something in there, it keeps the heat inside the chamber, and they blank it off, or you put something in there, you put a balloon, there's things that they put into there to keep the heat from escaping.
Are you doing that while the heat is
No,
coming?
before. That's in preparing the chamber.
When you're heating up the chamber.
Before you heat up the chamber, somebody will have to put something into there so that the heat stays in. Excuse me.
The problem is, the spray dryer is heated by the air.
Yes.
Right, it's not just the fire, right?
Mm-hmm.
The air's got to go somewhere.
Okay, you're right. Okay, so maybe the blank has to be put in. Will you block it? You block this over here, so that when you're going to be catching this chamber over here, the heat is going to stay inside, and you close it off and escapes for the heat to get out.
Over here, you got to stop it.
Well, I put it over here. I put the line over here, because we've got to get water out of here. But in some place, the heat stays reasonably inside. The hot air, the hot air and the heat that you're building up. In some, there escapes over here.
Yeah, that's actually, I'm thinking the one I got in over. it's not going to work. If the air doesn't have anywhere to pull through,
yes, so you're right. In the heating up, it is like that. But there comes the point that now we're finished heating it up and we're now ready to start kashering. At that point, something to go in there to try to hold our heat in there as well as we can. Okay? It has to be something that's prepared from beforehand, but you're right that it probably should go in later. You're right. Okay, and then lastly, which is the main thing, is you take water in some other kettle, where it's heating in some jacketed kettle or whatever it is, some kind of a kettle that's heating up. The water goes through the spray balls into the chamber, and then when it comes out of the chamber, you don't let it go onto the floor. That water then goes right back to the kettle that it came from, and you make a loop of water going from the kettle to the dryer, out the bottom of the dryer, back to the kettle, around and around. This helps you build up temperature. Okay, there's a thing called evaporative cooling, okay, which means is when water sprays into the chamber, some of the water boils, and that cools down the rest of the water. Okay, so the science is not important. Well, that's what happens. When you spray water into it, the water sucks in all the heat from the chamber, and that's why the water comes out cold. Some of the water boils, and the rest of it comes out cold. So if you keep running it around and around, you'll build up enough heat in there that you'll overcome that evaporative cooling, and you'll eventually have just the whole thing will come out boiling. Okay? If you cycle it around enough, you will come out with water that's boiling. Okay, in spite of Yossi's argument. Okay, you will come out with water that's boiling. Now, sometimes the kettle can't handle it, meaning you're putting it back to a kettle that just can't heat up fast enough. It's not meant to do fast heating, so it took you an hour to heat up all that water. Now you put it through the spray dryer, it comes back in for 2 seconds to run through, it doesn't heat up enough.
Well, it's pretty hot when it comes out. You don't need another hour, you're not starting from scratch. Right,
but it usually comes out at 150 degrees. The first time you go through, it's going to come out at 150 degrees. It's not going to come at Kashering. It's not at 50. It's not at 60 degrees like outside, but it still needs a lot to go.
Wait till it boils, so you send it through.
You can wait for the water to boil, but when you put boiling water through the first time, the evaporative will cool it off. It will come out at 150 degrees the first time. So now you send it back to the kettle. If the kettle took an hour to heat the first time, how much heat is it going to get in the 10 seconds that it sits there?
You're talking about heating up the kettle and sending it through the spray bowls.
Yes, from the kettle through the spray bowl.
That's going to be pretty lot faster than going through a nozzle.
Right, of course.
A lot of water.
Of course, it's going to go, and that's why you're going to circulate the water back. Like he said, why start with water, fresh water? Take this 150 degree water and send it back again for a couple passes. So sometimes, in plenty of cases, if the kettles can't handle it, either they put a couple kettles, so it goes from one to the other to give more chance to heat, or they'll put a direct steam injection along the line. It's called a pick heater. I mean, in the line is putting steam right into it.
The kettle.
Not in the kettle. It's in the line between the kettle and the dryer. In that pipe that's going there, they're putting steam right into it to give the water an extra boost to get up the temperature. Okay.
I can imagine they're able to do it in spray dryers like in Inova, which are not such big spray dryers. And 3-story spray dryers.
No, those big ones were like his bread and butter. He loved those. Like that was his kind of a place.
He told me like 212 degrees in those places. Did you use your own eyes?
I don't remember how I saw his things, but he's retired now. But he does it. That was his thing. That was like his life. You know what I mean? And again, he would have to cajole and fight, and he knew. He also had a tremendous. He spent so much time on this that he knew the ins and outs of this, and he would tell them, "Well, we got to change this, and we got to raise this pressure on the other thing." And he knew all this kind of stuff. I mean, so him and the engineers were really talk to each other. You have to see him in action. Okay. And yes, that's the basics. Okay, again, we're not going to be able to do it as well as he did. We can't pull it off. But just like by you, they get it, even if you said to over 200 degrees, that means they're doing something reasonably right, because the normal person who Kashrus gets at 150, and then it goes through the cycle and comes out at 110 degrees, comes at nothing, comes out cold. So this is what he used to do. And then move this now to the next thing, to the cyclone, and move it to the duct, each piece one at a time, and he was able to pull it off. Okay, that's the Kashrus Yosef, what he does, or as much as we understand of what he does. Okay, so now I'm gonna really, you have to try. You do, I know, when you do your company. I don't know what other ones we have.
We don't have
they would do some of that.
No.
They don't do
HP Taylor.
Right. That the RC there has nothing about that. It's whatever. It's a joke. Okay, whatever it is.
Do we get Liebman by any of these places?
Yeah,
I got no problem with these places.
By you, they do.
No, okay. I mean,
I do get the chance to refill steam by me, but I know. I like to use the regular. I use the hot water. It kind of drops of water like crazy all over the wall. full of water.
Only because we're using out a hose, right?
Right.
Yeah, we used to use a spray nozzle. It was no garnish. It was.
What? It does go through a spray nozzle.
Oh, it goes through the spray
It goes
nozzle.
through a spray nozzle.
So,
For some reason, but so much water, I guess, the amount of water, I don't know, some reason more. It's full of water. Okay, I don't know.
Okay.
Water, I mean...
We'll get it at a different time.
some flavor combination retail of Genesis
It's like theirs is all kosher. They don't...
I believe it, okay.
Wait, let's just...
Wait, that's what I get at.
Okay, fine. Let's do some other dryers. Okay, let's do some other dryers. First of all, just to learn about the dryers, but also to apply these rules that when you do leave and hagol. Okay, the first one, I don't know if you guys have seen it, so if you have, we're not going to do all the ones that are in here. We'll do some of them. On page 10, page 10 is a drum dryer. Okay, a drum, page 10.
A drum?
Drum dryer. Okay, what it does is, this takes stuff that's like pasty and turns it into a powder, into flakes.
Pasty, is it?
Pasty, like, it takes like potatoes, mashed potatoes, okay, it's like a paste of mashed potatoes. You plop it onto this in a very, very thin layer, and it comes off like a sheet of, and then you just grind up that sheet, and it's like flakes. Okay, like instant potatoes comes off of a drum dryer. That's what it comes from. Okay, and what you do is like this. You have this huge drum, okay, and it's made of very thick metal, and it's long and huge, and the inside of it is hollow. And what it is the inside is filled with steam. So if you could think of this thing, the inside is filled with steam, the walls are reasonably thick, it's burning hot, the walls. And then you drizzle onto it a very thin layer drizzles onto this thing. It rotates. This drum is rotating, and you drizzle onto it a thin layer of this liquidy, mushy stuff, and in the 10 seconds that it takes from that drizzle to hit from the top of the circle to the edge, it already dries. All the water boils off. You're putting a pretty thin amount, and the thing that's hitting is burning hot, and the water just boils right off of it, and the stuff like gets caked onto it, to the point that if you look at the picture, you see there's a blade, a scraper, that as the thing turns, look at this picture, as the thing is turning to the clockwise, it's hitting the scraper blade, the big fat line, the big black line, and the scraper blade scrapes the stuff off, so that it can come around and get some more stuff sprayed onto it again. Okay, so it has just a few seconds between the time it sprays onto it till it hits the scraper, and it dries on instantaneously, and it scrapes off into a long sheet. It looks like a sheet of paper. Okay, the stuff comes like paper coming off, and then you just grind it up, and it turns into flakes. Okay, so the drum, this thing does not have a fire to it. Kamat never has a fire to it. It's usually just steam, filled up with steam, and so it needs hagala. And the way you kasher it is reasonably easy also, which is you fill the chamber back up with steam, okay, to get it hot, and then when it's nice and hot, you can spray water on it at a slow pace, spray hot water onto this burning hot drum, and it will boil as it hits it. Okay, and the chachma here is to not put too much water, or else it won't boil, and to not put too little water, or else it'll turn into steam. Okay, the chachma here is to get the right amount of water that should be liquid.
Where do you get that water from?
From like a steam jenny, from some way to
hose.
From a hose. A company has a steam and water mixing hose. Well, there's a hose, instead of hot and cold water, one side is steam, one has water, and the water can come out of it any temperature you like to. So you want to shoot that water that's be'erach boiling. Be'erach boiling, if it goes too high, it'll come out of steam. So you put a be'erach at boiling, and it hits this thing, and you have to slowly go over each part of it to make sure you hit every spot. It doesn't.
What's wrong if it turns into steam instantaneously off the drum?
Because you have to kasher with water.
It's water.
Okay. If it is water and then if it hits it and boils instantaneously, that's fine. Besides, it shouldn't come out as steam right out of your hose.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
At any place in the world you can kasher with live steam? No,
Moshe says it's the shaila and you should be machmir. He doesn't say for sure that it does. He says it's better to not do. I'm not familiar with people hold it. So okay, so it's not so complicated. What's funny, but what's more complicated for the kashering is that first of all, there's a lot of places where food can get stuck in here, like on the scraper blade and things like that. There are places where it gets stuck, and you have to remember, like I said last time, to kasher the little pieces. There are mama shovels. as the stuff comes straight through, there are guys sitting there with shovels, and there's brushes, and all kinds of other things that are used here that, aside from the drum, you can't forget about all the little pieces that need to be kasher, which are easy to kasher. They're not anything complicated to kasher, but can't just forget about it. What do you say?
Just go stick into a camel.
Right, it's easy to kasher. I'm just saying you have to remember to kasher. It's not like it's hard to kasher. You just have to remember that. Okay, then, skip some pages, okay, to page. Okay. Now here's a nafkamina between the cases we talked about, whether it needs hagol or liba. Okay, there's something called a rotary dryer. Okay, a rotary dryer means that, which means that you have, again, a long shell. Okay, we're on 14, 15, 16, like. Okay, you have a long shell. And what a rotary dryer means is that it rotates, and the food in a drum dryer, the food's on the outside. In a rotary dryer, the food is on the inside, and the thing turns around. And as it turns around, the food is getting like stirred up. The thing is not full. The thing has a certain amount of food in it, and as it turns, it's like churning the food. Okay, so the food gets turned over and over. Let's say it takes a few minutes till it gets from one side to the other side, and at that time, it has a chance to dry. Okay, it's not on the outside, it's on the inside of the drum. And as the thing is rotating, it's churning the food around and around. The food is getting a chance to get dried off, and by the time it gets at the other end, it's dry. Okay, now there's two ways. There are two ways to have a rotary dryer. One is what's on page 14, which is indirect rotary dryer, which means is the thing that heats that dryer is steam coils. Okay, there are steam coils running through the center of it, making the thing hot. Okay. As far as we're concerned, that's considered off the fire. There's not a fire in there; there's just steam tubes in there, so you can catch that with hakola, which is really easy to catch with hakola because you just got to fill it up halfway with water and let it rotate. Okay, turn on the steam, let it rotate, and water will boil, and you catch the whole thing. That's easy to catch from that side because it only needs hakola. Okay, and it's meant for heating things up. That's the easy one. Turn to page 16. That's a direct rotary dryer. This is used like coffee beans, and I saw it last week, and they make smoke with this kind of thing. Here, there's a fire in the middle of this chamber, and what's turning around, the things that are just floating around. There's no steam chamber. There's a big fire burning in there. That thing needs libun. Okay, if that thing becomes treif, that thing needs libun. Okay, I'm not. Maybe it could do libun to itself. Maybe it can handle. I don't know. I doubt it. Usually, things that need libun are hopeless, and you can't catch them. But here's the nafkamina. This is on the fire, and the other rotary dryer is off the fire because it's using heat, but instead of a fire, it's using steam. Okay, so that's a nafkamina from things that we do. One other thing for these rotary dryers that's worth noting, if you'll read all these pages, you'll see this thing. There's something called back mixing. Okay, just the concept is worth mentioning, which is a lot of things that you want to make dry in order to dry them out. The slurry that you make beforehand comes out too wet, too moist to even go into the dryer. So what you do is they put a certain amount of yesterday's product in. They take some of yesterday's powder, they put it into the slurry that they made, and that makes it a little drier. And they can put it into the dryer. Then, so what they do is, for every 100 pounds that they make, 5 pounds goes back into the last batch. Okay, so there's like a line going from the end. Most of the stuff is going off to be packaged, and a little bit goes back to be mixed into the slurry to make the slurry a little thicker. Okay, that's all good. That's all good and fine. There's only one problem. We're starting a kosher run on Monday. Okay, and we're going to run a week long of kosher run. So on Sunday they come to Kashering, Monday they start up the kosher run. Where are they going to get powder from to start off the run? You can't start this thing until you have powder from yesterday or from the run that was 5 minutes ago to start the thing up. So where are they going to get kosher stuff from to start the thing off when they're just starting the kosher run today?
I don't know. So why do you need powder to start?
The slurry, the mush that you want to dry off is too watery.
Right.
And if it goes into the dryer, it's not going to get dry. If there's too much moisture in there, the dryer can't get all the moisture out.
Right.
So you have to make it a little thicker and a little drier before you could put it into the dryer. So how do you make it thicker? So you could.
How do you do the first time? So
the answer is
first try they got it the other place.
There's other things you get it from okay. You can put in potato starch, or you put something else in to make it thicker also. There are ways to get around this problem. What I'm saying is that what they want to do is the system is built to take a little bit from the end of the line, and it like gets fed right back into the beginning of the line. No, I'm not saying that it's a problem. I'm saying is you have to just have your eyes open that somebody might want to put powder in from yesterday to get the thing started.
Don't put powder from yesterday.
It's just makes you weird.
Could you put in So that stuff is, let's say it was kosher, it was just kosher chanan.
Okay, good. So that's a shot. So you deal with that. I'm not telling you the solution to the problem. I'm just telling you that you should know such a thing, especially these rotary dryers. That's where it is, that they want to put in some powder from yesterday. That some of the systems even built like that with just an extra line going bad. They just be aware of it. Okay. Another common dryer that there is, we're not doing all these, is on page 18 and 19. The picture's on 19, which is a conveyor dryer, which is, it's a long belt. Okay, the belt goes on, it's hours it takes to go through the chamber. The picture's on 19. It takes a long time to go through, and it dries very, very slowly. Use this for like breakfast cereal. Because if you use too high of a heat, you're going to ruin the food. So it's for something that can't handle very high temperatures. So how are you going to dry it? Usually you use a lot of temperature to get it boil off the water. So this is a very slow process. You're like evaporating the water out of it at a low temperature.
It's called a low temperature, long time dry.
Yes, that's right.
Oh, really?
I mean, nobody calls it like that because it doesn't sound good. But that's effectively what it is. It's a low temperature for a long time, and it goes sitting through belts. It goes on and on and on and on and on through belts. Okay, at the class that they talked about this. Their chiddush was to mix this with a different kind of dry, do half of this and half of that. So it sits on these belts forever. Okay, so either you just have a long belt that goes on for half a mile, or they stack them like in the picture. Okay, it makes it easier in the first belt into the second belt, and there's the mile of having a lot of belts that it drops from one to one. Is that the product gets mixed up also as it drops off the belt. What happens if you have a big bed of stuff that's this high? How's the middle going to get dry? So every time it falls onto the next belt, it mixes it up a little. Okay, so these belts potentially could be legal. Okay, this is a potential problem here because meaning you have to replace these belts, or have, let's say, separate belts for milchiks and pyro, unless this thing is so low that it's such a low temperature, it's under 200 degrees, that you get it for the Rabbi Delsky while you don't need to do liba. Okay, that's not so common, but that's possible. Okay, but these kind of things, they go on endlessly. It's not like long as anything. And that's a different kind of a dry. Okay, one more that I'm going to do, with your permission, is fluid bed dryers. Actually, Moshe wanted to hear this, but he's not here. Fluid bed dryers on page 24. Okay, a fluid bed dryer. Now, a fluid bed dryer, not only is it itself a dryer, in some cases they put it together with a spray dryer. I mean, the spray dryer gets it pretty dry, and the fluid bed finishes it off. Okay, a fluid bed dryer cannot dry liquid. What it's for is things that are pretty dry, and it finishes off drying for them.
Like honey?
No, you can't put liquid. You can't put honey into this thing.
Too much liquid.
You can put in
powder, sweet, and other items.
Right. They put in sesame seeds that are toasted, that are need a drop more drying off. Okay, for whatever reason they come up. That was their example. That they come in reasonably dry, and they need a little more. Or let's say it comes out of a spray dryer.
It's called fluid bed.
I'm going to tell you why it's called a fluid. Oh, it's not for fluid. That's not why it's called a fluid bed. No, it's called. I'll tell you why it's a fluid in a second. It's like something comes out of a spray dryer. It still has too much moisture in it. They put it to this thing and it finishes it off. Okay, so it's coming in relatively dry. Now, a fluid bed dryer looks like this. It has a bed. Okay, let's say the bed is the size of this table. This is like a normal size of the table. Okay, and it's got 1,000 holes in it. It's like a screen. This whole thing the whole table is a screen. And you drop, we'll use sesame seeds, it'll be easy to hear. You drop the sesame seeds on, this is what's going to happen to them. They're going to fall right through the holes. Right? What you do is, you have hot air blowing up from underneath the table, through the bed, through the screen. Okay, this hot air blowing up through the screen. Which means is when the sesame seeds come down, instead of falling through the screen, they're going to be held up, they're levitated by the air that's holding them up, which dries them and holds them up. But if you think about it, what's going to happen is the seed is going to fall down, and it's going to hit the hot air, which is going to push it up. Then it's going to get a little too high, away from the heat, it's going to drop back down again. Okay, what's going to happen is the stuff that's on the fluid bed looks like it's like moving. Okay, it looks like a pot of boiling noodles. Okay, the whole thing is going up and down and up and down, and it's a fluidized bed. The bed of sesame seeds look like they're a fluid, like they're bubbling. Okay, they're not really, so it's called a fluid bed because the bed of product looks like it's a fluid, like it's like bubbling up and down. It's really solid, but it looks like it's floating up there. It's like bubbling around on top there. That's why it's called a fluid bed. Okay, and it's built in such a way that the air not only does it dry it, pushes it along the way. Okay, it moves it down so that the things move from the left side to the right side, and they come out dry when they come to the end. Okay, so it's called a fluid. It does not take fluid. No, I'm sorry. That's not clear. It should be clear. But it takes pretty dry stuff and it dries it by pushing them along the thing.
It's like an oven, really.
It's like an oven.
It's not really a dryer.
Well, okay, you call it what you want to.
I mean, dry herbs, the dry roast peanuts, you can call it a dry also if you want.
Okay, well that's more roasting. Yes, the line between drying and roasting is not so clear. But like that thing, what we had the belt dryer would be used for something like drying off herbs. You want them to dry slowly. They sit there and spend 10 hours going across the thing. Okay, so the fluid bed. Now over here, it's important to know what's heating up the fluid bed. Where's the hot air coming from? That's coming from underneath this table, underneath the deck, what they call it, the screen. If it's a fire, then that deck needs Libun. And if it's steam coils, which it usually it's hot air blowing over steam coils, then you just need Hagol to it. Okay, so someone's got to stick their head there and find out if it's a fire, and if it is a fire, is the fire close enough that it would need Libun? Is it close enough that it would give heat without having the fan blowing there? Would it give heat or would it not give heat? So you should know whether this thing needs Libun or Hagol. Okay, so here's a place usually needs Hagol. Usually it's just steam coils, but people will come with an assumption that it needs Hagol. It really needs. You have to look at it. You have to find out what's heating this fluid bed in order to know that it needs Hagol. And then the Hagol itself is more complicated. At first,
water going to fall right into the thing.
Right, you have to do spray balls. At first, I thought you could do Lieben Kal to it. I said, why don't you use the heat coming from underneath it to do Lieben Kal? Okay, it doesn't work very well because the fluid bed is built to have different heat settings in different spots, and it's not really meant for. There's a science to knowing how to. That first you heat it a little bit, then more, and it's not like adjustable that you can make it the whole thing burning hot and do Lieben Kal. I don't think that's really Lamaisa to do Lieben Kal. In theory, you could, but I don't think that Lamaisa you can pull it off. That Hagol is going to be the only way that it's going to work. Okay. Anyhow, the rest of this is for your reading pleasure. I know you have nothing else to do. There's really plenty in here. What we're not going to do now is what I would want to do. We'll do it later. Is one is the cyclones. The cyclone is the Kashering is pretty straightforward. The cyclone at the end of this document is about what they call collection equipment, which means that after you dry the thing, now you have to separate the finished product from the air. Okay? That's a chachma by itself, to separate the product from the air.
That's far away from there.
Yes, it needs Hagol. So it's just there's three types of collection equipment that clean the air from the product: a cyclone, a baghouse, and a scrubber, a wet scrubber. And those three could go with any dryer. Any dryer needs something afterwards to separate the air from the product. The cyclone looks like a dryer. It doesn't work like that, but it looks reasonably like a dryer. And it needs Hagol as done with the dryer. Baghouse and Mirza Hashem, if we remember, I will do when we get to Halacha Yichches, which is about Kashrus fabric. That's the shiloh there. A baghouse is full of fabric. That has its kind of shiloh to it. And this wet scrubber, which is not that good for this kind of equipment, but a wet scrubber really goes with distillation concepts, tough and base.